As the slide says, my name is Mike Deacon. I have been involved with the GCSE both in engineering and manufacturing, well, since its conception way back in the early 2000s. And so I've sort of lived the journey of GCSE engineering and manufacturing, and over a period of time it just seems that we keep having to follow current legislation and changes, and today is about another change that came in, or is coming in, for 2012 reforms, which is going linear. Now, John already asked you to do a simple poll, and you participated in that. You could all hear at the microphone. I've got two little polls to come up now. So if we can bring the first one in, it's about finding which sector you're currently teaching. So if that poll can be brought in, Amira, and then if everybody can just answer this: are you currently teaching on the GCSE? I'm just after a yes or no answer there, really. Okay, so we can actually publish those results. So as 50% of you are actually currently teaching on the GCSE, and 50%, half of you are not. So that's interesting, really. Okay, thank you. I have a second poll just before I move on to the slideshow in detail, and the second poll, if that can come in, is about which sector you're most interested in. So if you can answer whether you're interested in engineering or manufacturing, it just helps me for the rest of the slideshow. Okay, so that can be published, and you'll see that all of you are interested in the engineering provision, so in engineering specification. So obviously I'll emphasize that more than the manufacturing. Okay, thank you for that, Amira. We'll go on to the second slide. What I need to say is that most of the earlier slides relate to GCSEs in general, and the latter end of the slideshow will relate more to the engineering and manufacturing. Okay, firstly, what are the GCSE reforms? Well, Ofqual has confirmed that several changes in GCSEs in England need to take place from those starting in September 2012. I will be going into these in more detail, but these are just an overview of the changes at the moment. Linear means assessment at the end of the course rather than throughout. I shall go through that and what it means in more detail to do with our two specifications. And then we have the spelling, punctuation and grammar, and that is affecting other qualifications but not engineering and manufacturing. The qualifications mainly that's affecting are within the second bullet point there: English, literature, geography, history and religious studies. What it's fair to say is the performance throughout all of these qualifications still remaining as a measure 5 A* to C grades, and with the recent announcement, any of these GCSEs can count as headline measures, but the problem with GCSE engineering and manufacturing is that being double award, they will only count as one, but a little more about that later on. Now I'm going to release part of this slide part at a time. It is a very complex slide, or it will be by the time it's built, but you will have the option to view the recorded version of this later on if you need to go back to look at this. It's basically the timeline that Ofqual have asked us to introduce. I will flick on to a few fairly quickly, but basically if we get to the bits that really interest us, which is, in a moment, which will be this one that's come up now, the green slide, September 2011. I know that's already gone, but if you are delivering a your GCSE over a 3-year period, then this is something that would concern you, because it will, by the time it gets to 2014, it will be considered to be the linear required version. So for those who are delivering over a 3-year period starting September 2011, they do have to consider that. We're going to come back to that a little bit later on. What's the normal model will be those who are starting a 2-year program this September coming, and so that's likely to be the normal pattern, and it's probably where all of you sit at the moment. There is some information about external assessments which include the spelling, punctuation and grammar, but that, as I said earlier on, does not really affect us, so I'm going to sort of just press on a little bit. What you will notice there at the GCSE available as linear qualifications, May-June exam series only. So for those qualifications, those sectors, those areas, those subjects that had examinations more readily available, there is a tightening up of the time and availability of that. But in our terms, engineering and manufacturing, the first qualification of a linear award will be in June 2014. Okay, as I say, you'll have an opportunity to revisit this, because this session is being recorded, and you will have a link to this at the end. So I won't sort of go any more detail into this, but it is quite an interesting time frame and very complex, particularly if you're involved in other subjects such as English or geography. With engineering and manufacturing, it's not so complex for us. Just before I go on to this, could I just ask another poll number 3 to come in? This is about whether you deliver the qualification over a 1, 2 or 3 year. Now I know 50% of you at the moment have basically said you're not delivering it, so my question really is, do you or would you offer your GCSE, and it's got to be engineering we're talking about here, not manufacturing, do you offer it over a 1 year, 2 year or 3 year? Now I think I've just spotted that somebody else has joined us, another member, so if welcome, and if you join in with the activities that we're doing, the polls, and I can see now if that can be published, Amira. You'll notice that all of you at present are doing it over a 2-year normal delivery cycle, so the complexity is even less for you to worry about, and as indicated on that previous slide, we don't really need to worry about any starts prior to September 2012. Okay, thanks for that, Amir. If that can come off the screen now and I can get back to the slide. Okay, there's a couple of slides now which are about the GCSE reforms in general, and then later on I shall sort of go through how that relates to engineering in particular. Now, with the exception of subjects that are introducing marks for the spelling, punctuation and grammar, Edexcel had no plans, didn't have any plans to change the subject content of the specifications based upon the previous sort of specifications were seen to be fit for purpose. Although Ofqual announced these reforms, they more or less reflect and affect the way the external assessment is taken rather than changing actual external assessments themselves. And it does mean that candidates who take GCSE assessments at the end of a course for awards made from 2014 onwards, that is still going to be the same sort of thing. I mentioned a few moments ago that if we were talking about English language and some of the other subjects, then we would find that we are now there is now a restricted offer in the examination opportunities, but in some sectors, some subjects, there is going to be further opportunities, and they are in the English language and mathematics, which a retake opportunity will be available in November. As far as engineering and manufacturing goes, then we will only offer the one opportunity, which is May-June time. So there's nothing changed in that respect. The second slide, which is still in general terms, and this is about the additional marks that is being introduced through the reforms. The additional marks are going to be in certain papers, certain exam subjects, and the ones that are listed in the first bullet point there are the ones that are going to have extra additional marks for spelling, punctuation and grammar. The second bullet point there actually says that individual questions would include marks, or will include marks, for spelling, punctuation and grammar. I guess that's something in line with what has happened with the engineering and manufacturing, where in the last series, with the introduction of the new GCSEs that came on board a year or so ago, we finished up putting questions in which reward was given for the quality of written communication. So I guess in that respect it's something similar to what we've now been doing for a year or so. Okay, another slide which is still continuing the theme of the general information here. Edexcel is making no changes to controlled assessments content. Now, most of these statements I've been making, if you've been looking at the slides, you would see that they tend to have an asterisk there, which is because we are still in draft specification mode and we haven't yet published the engineering or the manufacturing specifications yet. So it is all this information is based on the off-qual accepting what we've done, but we're pretty confident that that will happen. So we can state there shouldn't be any changes to controlled assessments, and this does mean centres can continue to schedule their controlled assessments however they wish at their discretion, as long as it's sort of reasonable to fall in line with what the specification states that must happen. So in our case, you must remember that we have the controlled assessments are issued and there is some guidance there on the time that should be spent. But what under linear conditions, controlled assessments can only be submitted at the end of the course. Now that is the bit that's different. So it's a difference of timing rather than content. Another rule, controlled assessment unit results may be carried forward if a student wishes to retake the whole qualification. So again, this is another general change where if a unit is achieved early, then in the past rules and processes that would have been counted and would have continued as being part of the overall result of that qualification. Now that can only count if the student is retaking the whole qualification. A point worthy of note there is that last point where it says you will need to make sure that you are using the correct task for the submission date at the end of the course. Our control conditions last for 2 years, and what we need to do there, or what you need to do, is to make sure that the awarding period when your learners are going to come up for accreditation and come up for certification rather, and will be awarded their qualification, you will have to make sure that controlled assessment fits into that time pattern as well. We do renew and re-look at the control conditions every 2 years. I have that again just to go through again at a slide later on. Some of the information on this slide is not doesn't really affect us too much. What this is saying is that candidates will not be allowed to carry out unit results forward from one examination series to another. That was another way of putting what I've just described on that last slide, and it does go on to say where those units have already been used to count towards a single GCSE award, and a candidate wishes to reuse that unit result for a double award in the same subject, they can do that, because that's an exception to that. But like I said at the beginning of the presentation of this slide, in engineering we don't have a single award, so this doesn't affect us. The other exception to this rule would be where a candidate wishes to carry forward the result from one or more controlled assessment units in order to retake a whole qualification. Again, that was the same that was presented on the last slide. So the exception B there would be appropriate for any of you if a learner wanted to come back and retake a whole qualification. And just one more slide before we move on to our qualification in a more detailed way. The recent announcements for the 2014 school performance measures have indicated that 5 plus A star to C GCSEs, including English and Maths, will be in the headline measures, as they call them. And all qualifications which are a GCSE are going to count, all qualifications regardless of their size are going to only count as one GCSE. All GCSEs are in that headline measures list or catalogue, along with other vocational qualifications that will be continue to be recognised. For example, a lot of the BTEC specifications, qualifications are in that are allowed in the headline measures, and they are of a vocational qualification. But the GCSE double award in engineering and the GCSE double award in manufacturing are in that catalogue as available for a headline indicator within the 5 plus A star to C GCSEs. The only problem is they will only count as one single GCSE, so you would be delivering the equivalent of 2 GCSE time, but in the headline measures only counts as one. However, for that individual student, it'll still count obviously as a double GCSE. That's what they've studied, that's what they would have achieved. The baccalaureate, they're listed on the last bullet point, is obviously a measure which is awarded to a student who secures good GCSE grades, C or above, in particular subject areas. So we've got English, Maths, History or Geography, so that's humanities bit, 2 sciences, and crept in an ancient or modern foreign language. Okay, I'm going to move on then to more detail about our own qualifications, which are the engineering and manufacturing. And I think this is going to run through with good news all the way, really, because what we can say is that the changes that are going to come about through this new linear delivery is more to do, as I said earlier on, more to do with, in fact everything to do with the timing as opposed to the content. So what I can say is that there is no changes subject to the off-qual accreditation of the specification. There is no changes to be made in either the engineering or the manufacturing specifications content. And so from that point of view, there will continue to be 3 units, and you out there, the centres, you will continue to have freedom in your curriculum modelling and planning, and you could deliver the course over 1 or 2 years. We've already established that all of you here are delivering over or intending to deliver over a 2-year program, 2-year course, 2 years time. But controlled assessment has got to take place, or the reward for that controlled assessment that the learner participates in has to be recorded at the end of the linear delivery. So controlled assessment can take place. You have the freedom to have that take place any time during that course, whether it's 1 year, 2 year or 3 year. But remember, what you have to do is make sure that that is submitted at the end of the course, and that is when the examination needs to be taken as well. So in your case, the people in the room at the moment, that is going to be at the end of your 2 years. So this is going to be in May, June 2014. However, that's submitting the controlled assessments for moderation and sitting the exam. However, you could but deliver that controlled assessment at a time that suits you best in that 2-year delivery, but you don't submit the results until the end. But what you need to remember is the controlled assessment is for you there to control what goes on during those 23 to 33 hours, and we've not changed that advice of the times required for that. So at 23 to 33 hours, it might make sense to plan it backwards now from the moderation window, which would be the May-June 2014 in this first cohort that you have going through. So, just to recap, in both engineering and manufacturing then, the only influence that these changes to linear are going to have is really to do with the date and the time when the work can be submitted for moderation, or submitted for the cash-in as we call it, and that has to be at the end of the course. As I've already said, and we discovered by the poll earlier on, you are traditionally delivering over the 2 years, so it's summer 2014 when you need to be concerned. Okay, I said most of this is no change, and it should put you in make you feel comfortable about this. There is no change with exam sessions. However, learners will only be allowed to carry forward the result from any of the controlled assessment units if it's been reported, if they want to retake a whole qualification in the next series. So that's why it's forcing really centres to put the controlled assessment in for moderation at the end of the 2-year period for those learners, at cash-in period. I suppose that this really is confirming that, or sort of slight amendment to the old terminal rule. It's basically been superseded by this linear expectation that all assessment will be done at the end of the 2-year period. As I've already stated, several other of the subjects have additional marks for spelling, punctuation and grammar. You'd be quite pleased to know, I'm sure, that there is no change in engineering or manufacturing, so there will be no additional marks available for spelling, punctuation and grammar. However, you will be aware that we do take into consideration and take into account the quality of written communications, QWC, in all of the 3 units, and that the first delivery of that and process of that going through is with the current cohort. And we have in Unit 1 the design unit, Unit 2 the making unit, and Unit 3 the external exam. We do give reward for quality of written communications, and again I do have a couple more slides, just a little bit more detail about that, of what the continuing expectation is. But just before I go on to the next slide, I've got a poll which is asking about whether you use previous question papers and mark schemes. And because one of the things I could say, if you have a look at the previous papers and mark schemes, you will be able to see where the quality of written communication is being targeted in the exam. So if you could just answer this and just ask, or let us know whether you use previous question papers and mark schemes to help prepare your learners. Okay, there's a couple more. If another one of you to vote. There's probably one of you who hasn't voted at the moment then. I'll just give you a couple of seconds if you can do that. Okay, yes, so it can be published now. So yes, you all, if you can see the results there, all of you do use question papers and mark schemes to help prepare your learners. So that is good, and it will give you an indication of how we do reward for quality of written communications, which is something new, and you won't have had that sort of information or experience from previous exam series. So that is something new that you can be looking for by using these question papers and mark schemes. Okay, if that can be taken off the screen, that would. Okay, right, I'll move on to the next slide then, which is a little bit more detail about where the additional marks for spelling and quality of written communications in engineering and in manufacturing. Most of you in the room, well, all of you in the room at the time we did the poll said that it was engineering you were interested in, not manufacturing. So I'm sure you're aware that the engineering specification in Unit 1, there are several criteria, A, B, C, D and H, where the criteria actually specifies a certain level going across the mark range, certain levels of performance in relationship to the quality of written communications. And in Unit 2, less so, because it's more of the there's not so much writing to do in that unit. It is the making unit, but we still have quality of written response to written communications to reward in criteria B, C and H. If I remember right, I think criteria B, one of them is the production of the preparation of a production plan. So, you know, they need to be professionally prepared, understandable production plans. So that's why we're rewarding for written communications, the quality of written communications in those documents. Unit 3, which is a common unit, as you know, with the manufacturing, it's the longer response type questions, and it's usually going to be the ones towards the end of the paper, and it will usually be those that are worth 6 or more marks. And how you and the learners should recognise a question that quality of written communication is going to be rewarded, they will be labelled with an asterisk on the paper. So, you know, you can look out for this in the papers that you've told me you use, and build your bank up and be able to recognise where those sort of questions occur. I'm not sure if the person who joined late is manufacturing, but if any of your colleagues are interested in manufacturing, you can see the criteria there: A, B, C, D, E and H in Unit 1, which is one more criteria than the engineering, interestingly enough. And Unit 2, only one criteria is targeting quality of written communications. That's criteria B. And we've talked about the Unit 3, which is the common unit anyway. Okay, I like to see the red bits there, no change, minimum change. I think it's making you feel comfortable about the changes that we're expecting. The examinations, the structure of Unit 3 is going to remain the same, and we're still going to use pre-release materials, and that pre-release material, it will be issued every year, because now on an annual cycle of exams. So the pre-release for the May-June 2012 exam is already out there, and we will continue to structure the exam in that way. So the only change, as I said, it will be there won't be any change, but the thing to look out for is the quality of written communication still. On the controlled assessment, we're not intending to make any changes there. The choice of the tasks and the themes or the projects that are allowed for the controlled assessment will still be with you for Units 1 and 2. This is for either engineering or manufacturing, and as I've said earlier on, we will continue to review these tasks, these controlled assessment, every 2 years. So I think this is where, if you ever change to a model, none of you indicated that you're delivering over 3 years, but if you ever change to a model to deliver over 3 years, be careful with what controlled assessment you use, because you can see what I'm trying to say. If you started to use a controlled assessment with Year 9 students, Year 9 learners, then by the time it comes to cash-in, which is 3 years away, that controlled assessment would be out of date. So just be a little bit careful. You can still, however, choose to schedule the assessment of those 2 units, the controlled assessments of those 2 units, whenever you want to. I mean, that's for you to fix in with the resources and the availability of those resources that you have. But as we've said earlier on, the controlled assessment can only be submitted, or must only be submitted, for external moderation at the end of the course, at the cash-in period. So, you know, that's the rule. I've just got the phone ringing. If you can just excuse me a moment. You take that. Thank you. Right, sorry about that. The phone happens to be on my desk. And so, you know, my plea to you is really make sure that whenever you're using the controlled assessment, it's still going to be valid for the time that you need to submit that for external moderation. And I think if you can have that in the back of your mind, then you know you should be okay and won't get into a mess by Edexcel turn around and saying, well, you've used the wrong controlled assessment for this examination series. Okay, exam preparation then. I think it's sufficient, or I think there's sufficient past papers out there for you to be using throughout the delivery and the preparation for external exam for Unit 3, and all the previous past papers and mark schemes are still important documents for you to download and to use. So, and as no doubt you know, each past paper has a mark scheme, and there is also a principal examiner report that provides a range of information about how those questions performed. And also we do publish, or you should have gathered as you've gone through, if you've been delivering this over a period of time, previous pre-release materials, because that will give you an indication of the type of products that your learners should be researching and using. So there is also a principal moderator's report for each of the internally assessed units as well. So it is important that if you don't gather these because you have current learners going through the procedures, through the process, through these examination series, etc., if you're not got students who are doing that, learners who are doing that, it's important that you do go on to the web pages, the Engineering and Manufacturing GCSE pages, and archive as many past papers as you can, and mark schemes, and previous principal moderators' reports for the internally assessed units, because this is vital information that's stored there. And as time goes by, the older moderators' reports and principal examiner reports will be taken off to free up space for the more up-to-date ones, and once they're gone, you won't have opportunity to download those. So it is important. You can see the progression and the way the development of these qualifications have gone, so it is important that you do use them. Now, I just got a question about that actually, so if we can bring I think this is the last poll I shall be using, and it's about asking if you'd actually download and use these examiners' reports. So if you could complete this poll for me, I'd appreciate it. Do you download and use the examiners' reports available after each series? So you have to read which one you're going to answer. Yes, you do it every series. Yes, only for the series that you entered your learners. Or no, you don't. The people who said, I think there was one in there, one or two said they're not actually delivering yet. So what would you do if so if you're not delivering, if you're the delegates who indicated you're not delivering at the moment, what would you do? Would you pull it down every series, or would you pull the reports down only for the ones you entered, or would you not? Okay, it's probably caused a little bit of confusion because there are some in the room who are not actually delivering, so I suppose you can't really say whether you use it every series or only when you've entered your own. Okay, just give you a couple of seconds just in case you want to. There's one or two still to vote. Okay, well we'll publish those results. Now there's 50% of you have said you only do it for the series you entered your learners. I hope from what I've already said in relationship to when the slide was up there that you feel now probably engaged to go and get the previous examiners' reports, whether they be the principal moderator reports for the internally assessed units or the principal examiner reports for the externally assessed unit, because I do think there's valuable information in there, and if you can see, particularly with the exam, you can see alongside the paper and alongside the marks scheme, and you'll be able to see exactly what's happened. Somebody still continued to vote. Yeah, that's okay. So my encouragement to you is try and download the previous examiners reports, whether you actually entered your students for learners for those exam series or not, because there's a wealth of information in there, and you can have a look and you can see the type of questions that work well, the ones that the sort of the way that the marks are awarded as well, so it can help you always. Yeah, right, thanks for removing that. We'll move on to the next slide. Okay, I've told you really what the rules are for the linear delivery, and also indicated that you still have a fair amount of flexibility. However, it is the submitting of the work for moderation and the entry for the examination, the timelines that relate to those two activities that are really different to before. However, if you started to think about the approaches that you are taking or you might be taking, we've established earlier on you're all doing this over a 2-year period, but there's many models of different delivery curriculum models that can be employed, and there's just some suggested approaches here. For instance, you could begin, I know this is a tried method in a few centres, you could begin with either Unit 1 or Unit 2 from, say, September through to January in the first year, so in Year 10, with a view that you will build background knowledge and understanding for the other units. Alternatively, you could just be running Units 1 and 2 in parallel for that same period of time as well. But then, particularly after January to July in Year 1, you could split. If you started with either 1 or 2, you could then split and sort of split the delivery time equally between Units 1 or 2. So you could have thin units running over the whole year, or you could have some fatter unit delivery at the beginning and then thin it out later on. And Year 2 in that model could be equal delivery between all 3 units, because you've got to start to bring in Unit 3. Unit 3 is best assessed, or it should be assessed at the end of the 2-year period of delivery, the cash-in award series, and that would allow you then to have the second year as being the assessed year. So you could run the controlled assessment and the examination as well, but giving opportunities to practice exams running up to that final exam in the May-June period. However, whichever session you choose, or model rather you choose, curriculum model you choose, controlled assessment task has to be submitted by the 15th of May to the moderation team, and you'll be told who your moderator is as usual, and then we run into May, June and sit the exam. There's an alternative there. You could conduct the controlled assessment for Unit 1 or 2 in the end of Year 10 and the other at the end of Year 11. But remember, you would just have to hold on to the controlled assessment outcomes for whichever unit you did at the end of Year 10 until the end of Year 11. And then you pull them out of the cupboard and they go forward for moderation, meet up with the other one as well. So it's all about a timing issue really, rather than anything else. We could discuss, or I could discuss, the old debate. I never know, and I draw back from giving advice about which unit really is best to do first, Unit 1 or Unit 2. Having worked in engineering for a number of years, I certainly did see designs come out of drawing offices which you couldn't make. And likewise, I did see also people making things that were difficult to make because the designer hadn't had experience of making. So whether you do design unit first or the making unit first is a difficult call to make, and it's probably one that you will feel comfortable with if you've practiced a certain model over a number of years. So no need to change your delivery model if it's working. Okay, just a slide or two, and then there'll be opportunities for you to ask questions, which will be presented to me at the end there. But just a couple of slides about the support that you can get. There is Ask the Expert, and I'm sure I recognise one or two names in the delegate list who have used the Ask the Expert. But it does give you an opportunity to get in direct contact with a senior person who should be able to help you with the subject enquiries, and they have a contract to email you back within 3 working days. I actually carry out Ask the Expert for the 14 to 19 diploma, but for some reason, and I've worked out what that reason is, and I want to share that with you in a moment. For some reason I do often get Ask the Expert questions either to do with BTEC or to do with GCSE Engineering or GCSE Manufacturing, when in fact there are experts for those qualifications. And I found out what is going wrong really, and I'll just probably explain this to you so that if you need to use Ask the Expert process and a procedure in the future, that you don't get frustrated because it goes to the wrong person. When you click, you find the Ask the Expert window, and when you click engineering, it says engineering and processing actually. You click that, and there's a dialog box pops up which is yellow at that time, and it does allow you to type a question in. The problem is, if you then type that question in at that stage and submit it, it will go to any of the engineering and processing experts, which could be me, could be the BTEC one, could be the GCSE person, etc., etc. And you might not get the right person. But what you should do is drill down more in the menu structure. So rather than type your question in straight away, drill down, and then you'll have another option, BTEC or engineering or manufacturing, or you'll have GCSE, and eventually that dialog box will turn white. When it turns white, that's the time to type your question in, because it will be got down to the level that you have selected. So if you wanted GCSE engineering, you'll go to that and keep drilling down until you get GCSE, or to get engineering, then GCSE. Then type your question, it will go off to the right person. Okay, a lot on bullet point 1 there, I know. Other things that Edexcel is doing is keeping you informed by sending out a series of mailings, and over February and March, to ensure that you're kept up to date about the reforms. So I guess you'll probably be getting those as a matter of course. We have subject page as well. So on engineering and manufacturing, if you sort of are able to use that web link there, or in recording, you can go through and then sort of retype that into your browser, and that will take you straight onto the subject pages for engineering and manufacturing. Okay, I just want to run through a summary then of what we've done so far this afternoon. We've talked about the move to linear assessment. We've talked about additional marks for spelling, punctuation and grammar, but they're not in engineering or manufacturing. There are no plans to change the subject content of the GCSE specifications, and there's no plans to change the content of the controlled assessments. But remember, the GCSE Engineering and Manufacturing has a controlled assessment that is valid for 2 years, and then it gets reviewed. So make sure that whenever you start that controlled assessment, it will still be in date by the time you come to hand in for moderation. Units are not resat before cashing. In other words, you can't do Unit 3, the exam 1 year, do it again the next year and see which is the best result. The exam's restricted to summer series. That was always the case with engineering and manufacturing anyway. And the headline indicator for performance measures is going to continue to be those 5 plus A star to C GCSEs, of which English and Maths is there. And we've looked at the EBAC performance measures that have been introduced. There is an opportunity for you to pull down more details about these reforms. Edexcel has put a particular web page there, which is the edexcel.com normal website, and then /GCSE reforms, which will take you to a page which details more about the linear reforms. Okay, we were due to be 1.5 hours, and we always knew from the start that it probably wouldn't take 1.5 hours, as this is not the first one in the series, and it does give opportunities now for you to ask any questions. So